Australia would be one of, if not the number one choice destination for.
You've clearly built a USP, a business model that is clear. Australia, China bridge. How did you develop that with your social media?
I've started with...
You mentioned property, you've got Melbourne. Where is the localised opportunities? Any investor, I'm going in, where do I start?
For property-wise...
Where are the opportunities for an Australian company that's going to China?
If you're involved in that sort of area, I think that there continues to be opportunity.
I sat down with Ben McMahon, director of the McMahon Property Group, one of the leading property professionals in Melbourne and Australia. Since his arrival in China 12 years ago, Ben has gone from social media influencer to TV shows and movies, to building several successful ventures, from property to events and hosting. We discussed how you can turn your passion into a business, and the many emerging opportunities in the property market in Australia. His journey is quite an interesting one, building a remarkable profile as a bridge between Australia and China, which you can replicate with any country. Here's my chat with Ben McMahon.
Ben, we met 10 years ago.
How time flies, right?
It's flown. Do you want to tell the story how we actually met?
Well, I remember very clearly 10 years ago, we were living in the Hunan University dorm, which is a university in Shanghai, and it's actually really quite cute. There was a British bloke who put a message saying, "Hello, my name's Daniel. I've just moved to Shanghai. If you're free, it would be great to catch up for a drink." And I got that message under my dorm room door, and I thought, oh, great, this guy's got to be a really nice guy. And since then we've kept in touch and friends ever since. And it's been 10 years, I guess, now that we've both known each other and been involved in this whole Chinese ecosystem and journey. So
it's a great moral lesson because you need to be opening. Always be opening. You never know who you might meet. And I actually remember putting probably about 6 or 7 notes under people's doors either side of me, and you were the only one that got back to me.
Well, I was thinking at the time, I was just thinking, when I got that note saying hello, like someone that's willing to put in the time, obviously is someone that's worth keeping in touch with. And 10 years down the track, now we're still good friends.
So I know you've done a lot since then. So how have you gone from that Chinese student, that budding Chinese language student at Fudan, to now building multiple successful ventures that's bridging China and Australia?
It's interesting because as I reflect on 10 years ago when we were at Fudan University studying, at that time I didn't have any idea what I was going to be doing. I didn't know what sort of business or what sort of ventures that I wanted to be involved in, but I just really knew that I wanted it to involve China. And so I think at that stage I was very passionate about videos and social media and just communicating the differences between China and Australia. And so I was very involved with social media. So I'd be posting on Weibo and a lot of the Chinese social media platforms about, generally speaking, about China or speaking about Australia. And from doing that, after that year or so in Shanghai, then I went back to Australia and I finished off my my degree or my undergraduate, and I had been running a Chinese walking tour company. And so at the time, probably driven mainly from the social media things that I was doing, there was a lot of fans and followers that were asking things about, Melbourne, and asking things about, where's the best place for this, or, what's Melbourne famous for? And so then I thought, well, you know what, I can probably just do tours. And I found out that at the time there were tours being done, but a lot of those tours, they would only take the tourists to, 1 or 2 places. So in Melbourne might be the Queen Victoria Market, which is a big market that we have, and the 12 Apostles, which are, near the beach side. And I thought, well, you know what, if I had friends that were coming here, I wouldn't just be showing them these places, I'd be showing them, the best coffee shop that I like, because Melbourne's so famous for its coffee, or I'd be some of the really classic more unknown art galleries. And so what I did at the time, then I thought, well, one, I want to make a bit more money than I could working at a fast food restaurant or something, and so I'll do this walking tours. And there's very low barriers of entry to starting up a walking tour company because it's a walking tour, right? Like you don't need to be doing too much. And so then I made a tour of I thought the Melbourne CBD and the best things around that sort of area, and I just started taking the tours. And so I worked a lot with some of the local travel agents, and they would, for them, it's a great product too. You know, you've got a local Melburnian speaking your language, taking you through the CBD. But then that tour itself changed over time too. So I started with a lot of the history about, you know, Flinders Street Station, which is one of the train stations here. It was built in 1926 or whatever. And then after a while, I realized that my people on these walking tours, they didn't really care too much about the history because it goes in one ear and out the other. Whereas what they were really interested in was, well, me talking about my grandparents used to go to the Flinders Street Station, and there's a secret ballroom that's on the first level, and they used to dance in that ballroom. And this would have been, you know, back tens and tens and tens of years ago. And so they found those personal stories more easy to connect with, and that's what they were interested at. So when I took them to the coffee shops, and I'd say, look, I remember coming here with my dad when I was younger, and we would go here and then we'd do that. That's what they found was really, really meaningful and interesting. And then after I did those walking tours for a while, then I started to realize, well, the people coming on the tours, they're not only just interested in traveling, they've also interested in, well, investing and buying and potentially even migrating to Melbourne. And so then my family has a history or a background in property. And so I thought, well, you know, it'd be really good then to be involved in, say, commercial property sales. And at the time I joined probably the leading commercial real estate sales agency, and it was a lot of fun. And we were very heavily involved with Chinese purchasers or investors and sellers, and so at that stage I was, you know, heavily involved with selling commercial property to a lot of Chinese buyers or locally based Chinese buyers, and so that gave me exposure to a lot of different, very smart, successful property people. And for Chinese, one of the things that Chinese love more than anything is property. And so through that journey, then I made a lot of unique connections. And then after that, then I've now run our family property business, which is involved in commercial property investment and development. And we have links to, you know, with Chinese, just given my background too. And so I guess getting back to your question at the very start, it's been a journey, and it's slowly changed as I've done more. But China's always been part of that journey, and probably we'll chat later on too as well. But I've done quite a lot of TV shows over the time too, and so I also do a lot of event hosting in Chinese back in Melbourne and also overseas sometimes too. And I find through doing that, it's a great way to get exposure. It's a great way to again demonstrate that connection that you have with China, or the Australia-China bridge, or the Australia-China connection, which is kind of where I operate. And then I always have opportunities of meeting more people. And when you meet more people, then more opportunities come about.
It goes back to our original story of how we met. That simple note just opens doors, and you never know. And it's an incredible story, how you've been able to adapt, evolve, and really tap into the Chinese psyche. And you mentioned on your tours that the Chinese audience were a lot more interested in that personal story. So how does that relate to doing business with them as well?
Well, I think when you're able to connect with someone, like in China, it's talked a lot about guanxi, which is, you know, the relationship that you have with someone. When you have a personable connection with someone, or when you know their personality and what they stand for, then it's memorable. And so I guess, why do I continue to do Chinese social media? One, because I love it and I think it's really fun. But two, I'm reinforcing that I am a bridge between Australia and China. And so, you know, I'm always trying to talk about Australian things. And for me, now I'm predominantly doing property, but property is, you know, if you're selling an office building, or if you're selling an apartment, it's really a lifestyle, and it's everything that relates to that. And so I guess when people think about property and they think about Melbourne or think about Australia, well, hopefully they think about me too.
So you've clearly built a USP, a business model that is clear. Australia, China bridge. How did you develop that with your social media and media career?
I think I've started with, again, this is right back 10 years ago when we were in Shanghai, and it started from a passion, and I just enjoyed just sharing information. And so I just would keep sharing information, and I slowly grew followers. And then a couple of TV shows opportunities came up. And so I've done one which is called Chinese Bridge, and that's where they get, it's almost like an Iron Man or an Iron Person contest for people from all around the world. You've got people from every country really in the world, and then you go through all these Chinese poetry and singing and all these competitions, and it goes for about a month. And so I went from doing that competition, and which is broadcast on TV in China, and then from that came up a couple of other TV show opportunities, and everything from the date show in China, 非诚勿扰, to then doing a couple of other ones where we even had one where it's called 妻子的浪漫旅行, and they had 5 famous Chinese actresses, including the leading actress from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon,
Jiangsu.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then so they came over, the group of them, and to Australia, and they needed a local guide. Well, I had run the walking tour business in the past, and I was active on Chinese social media. So then they asked me to be the guide. So I took them around Melbourne to some of the places there too as well. And then the most recent TV show that I've done was one called 非正式会谈, which is where you've got 10 representatives from around the world. And so you've got Australia, you've got Japan, you've got Russia, and we all sit around a table and we kind of debate and talk about topics which are relevant to generally Chinese youth. But what's really unique about that one was that I was playing myself. So I was just being myself, and of course, like the most interesting version of myself, but talking about my own stories. And so my history of being involved in property in Melbourne and being really passionate about Melbourne and always saying that Melbourne's the most liberal city in the world, that was a fantastic platform and opportunity to keep talking about that. And then I find by doing these, the TV shows or Chinese social media and hosting events too as well, which are Chinese events, then you're staying relevant and you're meeting new people too as well. And so opportunities come from that, and by having that sort of connection with different people.
So how did you grow your social media into what it is today? Because clearly you've built a social media channel that is based on passion. You had some vision, but you weren't like, I'm going to be famous. So how did you do that?
I think you touched on it too. It started off just as a passion, just as sharing things about my life and my stories and everything that I'm involved in. And then slowly as that following grew, well, then I thought, okay, well, then I can actually use it as a fairly powerful channel to communicate, and be it walking tour or be it hosting events or be it property, like I can all market and communicate that through these channels. And in terms of my strategy, it's always come from a position of passion. But for me, because I know my position is being a bridge or being that channel between Australia and China. And I'm not American, I'm not British, I'm not French, and so I don't know too much about France. I don't know too much about other countries, but I do know Australia, and I really know Melbourne, and I'm really passionate about it. So with this social media stuff, I think it was also a recognition that it's not like you're just going to have a viral video or a viral post and that's all you need to do. It's consistent posting and consistent communication, and then people start to identify and say, this person is that thought leader. Or when someone's thinking about Melbourne, and they're from China, I'm hoping that they're going to think about me. Or even students when they come to Australia to study, and if they're from China, they can use my content as a means through which to understand and explore the city. And then that sort of platform, then probably from that comes in, well, maybe if they're looking to invest or they're looking to buy property, well, then they're going to think of me too. And fortunately, China's really like property. So I think it's worked quite well that that I'm passionate about China and passionate about sort of social media stuff, and then also passionate about property, and seems to work and have good synergies.
You've built a trustworthy persona for yourself, right? Clearly a bridge. So with those inbound Chinese, where are the opportunities in Australia once they come over?
So I think with Australia's got a lot of really good qualities. And because it is ultimately based in Asia, that the time difference between China is only 2 to 3 hours. So, and it's very convenient to get to. Australia would be one of, if not the number one choice destination for Chinese international students to study, and also for Chinese to migrate, Chinese to travel, and Chinese to invest. And it's a very, very good destination for a number of reasons. And Sydney and Melbourne tend to be the leading destinations for investment and migration for Chinese to Australia. But that investment decision is often driven by lifestyle, and so a family might have a Chinese child and they are thinking, well, they might study in Australia, maybe even migrate longer term, or they might just study there. And so from a property perspective, generally that is coupled with, well, they might look to buy an apartment or buy a house for their kid to live in when they're in Australia, and then maybe for themselves if they're looking to migrate or move to Australia longer term. And so at the moment, China's got 1.3 or 1.4 billion people, 20% of the world's population. So there's a lot of people, and Australia's got 25 million people. So our population, the whole of Australia, of which is probably land mass size is similar to China, it has a smaller population than Shanghai. And so from a property perspective, that we have so much opportunity to build more apartments and houses, and we need to be able to facilitate. At the moment, we've basically got a housing crisis in Australia because there's not enough houses, but we've got so much migration coming. And so for property, there's just such an amazing opportunity to be particularly involved in that residential space, because we just need more apartments. But it is changed a little bit. Like the real boom years for Chinese investment was 2012, 13, 14, 15. And at that stage, I could have a new apartment building with 500 apartments, and I could sell all of them off the plan in China. And within a day, maybe I've sold them all. But that's changed a little bit just because of regulations and also to just general sentiment. But I think the underlying recognition that Australia is a great destination to invest, to travel to send your kids for studying university or high school, and to invest in for property, that's still there. So I'm really, I look very favourably on the next 10, 15, 20 years, the opportunities for being involved in the real estate space in Australia, and also tapping into the Chinese market for investment, purchasing and the like.
Yeah, it still seems as a dream destination for Brits as well. We see that as the paradise, the haven
That's right. I can, from experience, there's a lot of British people in Australia at the moment.
Bondi Beach.
So, yeah, I mean, they do. So a lot of them, they go to Bondi Beach, but also even in Melbourne, like when I'm going around, I'm hearing the British accent all the times in the streets. There's a lot, so it's not only Chinese that are migrating to Australia. There's also, from all over the world.
So let's dig into Melbourne. You mentioned property, you've got Melbourne. Where is the localised opportunity? So I'm going there from any country, any investor, I'm going in. Where do I start?
For property-wise, there's opportunities everywhere. It just depends. You've just got to buy things well. And I think probably the first and foremost thing to talk about would be the residential market is just, we have not enough apartments and houses in Australia and in our major cities at the moment, but we still have high migration levels. And migration is a really important part of the Australian economy, and we need more people to be coming, so more people pay taxes, and then the more, that means you can do more stuff. But in order to facilitate that migration, we need more houses and apartments. So if you're involved in that sort of space, then whilst it is challenging and tough at the moment with construction prices and building things, but sooner or later it's probably quite a good area to be involved in. And then outside of that, then you can look at shopping centres, you can look at industrial, which is logistics and warehouses and sheds. Like, that's gone crazy over the past 10 years because, you know, we just need to buy stuff online, and in order to facilitate all that stuff, you need more sheds. But I think probably the underlying opportunity to talk about is population growth is underpinning everything in Australia. And when you have population growth, well, then you need more of stuff. And a lot of that population growth will be from Chinese migration.
So outbound, when we think of Australian companies, I know that Australia is one of the biggest exporters of rocks, isn't it? And minerals, that's what I heard.
Iron ore.
Iron ore. Where are the opportunities for, let's say, an Australian company that's going to China?
So I think you touched on natural resources, of course, is a big part of Australia because we're a big piece of land and we've got lots of natural resources. And China has 1.3 billion people, a lot of people. There's a lot of demand for building more things and infrastructure and the like. And so that's obviously one of the leading areas in the Australian economy question. Probably international education is also a really big one too. And Chinese international students tend to be the number one, or at least, you know, the top two or so for the population of international students coming to Australia to study. And so if you're involved in that sort of area, I think that there continues to be opportunity because there's just so many students that want to go overseas to study, and then anything that's related to that. So international students, then there's travel or there's services that are related to international students, international education in Australia. And then for us, I guess, when you've got more people coming to Australia to study or to do whatever, well, then there's opportunities in the property sphere with things that are related to their needs, be it living or be it, you know, retail shops. So they've got to go and eat food and stuff. And so in terms of purchasing retail in areas where students are going, it's also probably quite there's opportunities there too.
I see you do a lot outside the property sphere. So you do a lot of hosting. I saw on my WeChat moments the other week that you did something for Chinese New Year. You've done something with baby milk powder. Why?
So the reason that I keep hosting or being involved in particularly Chinese events back in Australia is one, like, of course, like, it's quite fun to be out there. But the reason that I mainly do it is that because it creates opportunities to meet more people. I think it makes you're relevant to as well. And I find that through, so say, the most recent event I hosted was the Chinese New Year celebration in Melbourne. And, you know the who's who, everyone's just there. And so it's a fantastic opportunity to be up there. One, talking about, again, it's the Australia-China Bridge, and everyone's seeing that you're hosting that sort of event. And then I get the opportunity to meet everyone after the event too as well. And so I think it's an active and conscious commitment to continuing to network, to meet more people, to reinforce in everyone's mindset. You are a bridge between Australia and China, and whilst some of the things that I host aren't directly related to property, that I've hosted all sorts of things, like you said. Some might be a milk powder event, it might be one for a vitamin event, or it might be an educational event. But I find that all roads, kind of, for me at least, lead back to property. And so everyone's that are at these events, it might be an opportunity to do business with them, or there might be a relevant contact for later down the track. So I think it kind of gets right back to the start, how we were talking about your journey from being a student to now being involved in property. Well, I've never been 100% sure exactly where it's going to go. Of course, I've got aims and I've got plans and strategy about what I want to achieve, but I think opportunities sometimes arise out of areas that you might not be completely aware of. And there's been lots of examples too where I've been hosting an event and I've been chatting with someone, then they say, oh, you know what, actually, I can introduce you to this person, or I'm looking to do this. What about we talk about this? And so these are things that I'm not necessarily aware of at the time when I'm hosting this or involved in these events, but it's by putting yourself out there that then they unlock these opportunities to do business in other sort of ways. So I think for someone like myself, like I'm really involved in that Australia-China space. I want to continue to be involved in it. And whilst 98% of my time I'm doing property, but these social media activities and also just live events, I find kind of the icing on top, and they complement each other really, really well.
Just getting yourself out there is exposure, but also doing what you love at the same time.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, it's pretty fun getting up there and speaking Chinese and cracking a couple of jokes. And then afterwards, of course, everyone in the audience, they know who you are. And then it's very easy to chat with other people once they've seen you up there, talking about Chinese culture and cracking a couple of jokes and idioms here and there. So
It was you that told me just learn like 10 idioms that are really common and then go out, which anyone could learn, right? You could learn 10 4-character words,
Absolutely.
phrases, and then deploy them with Chinese people.
I think you hear it all the time. Like if you're able to speak a little bit of any sort of language, it really, the other person, they respect that. And so particularly if you're doing business with China and you don't necessarily speak fluent Chinese, or maybe you speak pretty good Chinese, but if you're going to have a couple of idioms or things that you can say, and idioms are really simple in Chinese because they're normally just 4 characters. So even if you don't speak Chinese, you just got to know these 4 characters, and they might have a meaning that you can always drop at a event, and straight away people they'll remember that, and they'll remember that you mentioned that sort of stuff. So I think if you're involved in that Chinese space and you can have a couple of those up your sleeve, it will leave an impression on people.
Can you share one, maybe one that you've got as a weapon in your arsenal that you find is very relatable, and if you say it, and it's simple for maybe a non-Chinese speaker as well?
So I think I can give 2. One is particularly if it's Chinese New Year, you want to be able to say 新年快乐, which isn't an idiom. It's just a way of saying Happy Chinese New Year. And if you're in the Year of the Dragon, which is at the moment 龙年大吉, which is like be very prosperous in the Year of the Dragon. But I think I'm trying to think. Gosh, there's so many idioms, right? A really good one that I think is probably good that could be used here and there is 心想事成, which is whatever your heart thinks of, you can achieve. And so I think in like a business sense, working together, 心想事成, it's like, you're wishing them that whatever you wish, we can make a reality. So 心 means heart, 想 means to think, 心想事 means things, 成 is to become or to realize.
So 心想事成.
心想事成, yeah, 心想事成.
Well, thank you so much. And 谢谢 Eddie.
不用谢，这该做的。
Being on the pod. Where can people get in touch with you?
So you can see me in terms of my Chinese social media stuff, it's on YouTube, it's Red Roo Ben, red the colour, Roo's in kangaroo Ben. And then I think on other social media platforms, it's the same. Then my Chinese social media platforms, be it Weibo and the like, and Bilibili, it's 红袋鼠小明, which is the same sort of thing, but in Chinese. 红, which is red, 袋鼠, which is kangaroo, and 小明, which is my Chinese name or Chinese nickname too as well. But yeah, it's good, Daniel. It's been such a pleasure, and it's so good. I'm quite nostalgic actually chatting here and thinking about 10 years ago we were studying in Shanghai together, and here's to the next 10 years.
Yeah, and you haven't aged, by the way. You look exactly the same as 10 years ago.
It's amazing what face cream and moisturiser and everything can do for you.
Yeah, thanks so much, mate.
Awesome.
And subscribe, like, and see you next time.
See you then.